Welcome back, everybody. I'm Nicholas, and today I'm going to be drawing some fantasy armor for you, specifically for Pathfinder or D&D. I've had a few people ask me about my process and what I do to design armor. I'm going to go ahead and start doing this sketch for a female fighter. I really want to do a female fighter, partially because I love the whole kind of cobbled together armor that fighters get. They have access to everything, and they just grab and go and kind of bulky. But I also want to do a female sketch because there's constantly people talking about female armor not being effective, or basically just being too sexualized and not functional, which I think armor should be functional first, and I think it can look pretty cool that way. So I'm going to start with a sketch of female form and a pose that I like. It doesn't have to be too clear because I'm going to be covering all of it up. So you could even go as far as to use a picture of yourself, snap a quick picture of one of your friends, your family members, just to get the pose that you want. And then you can start applying the outlines and the armor on top of it. I generally try to find a lot of reference when I'm doing armor. And I get a lot of that from like Pathfinder or D&D books, just because they have a lot of really good armor, and it all feels really well together, fits really well together. So for this one, I started with what book am I using here today? I started digging through the Ultimate Equipment book, just looking at all the armor sets they have in there. The Pathfinder books have always been great inspiration for fantasy armor and equipment. Just looking at the monster manuals or the equipment guides, or just like the small pages with all the equipment on them. As a kid, I was just like fascinated with. I'm like, oh, a grappling hook? Yeah, I'm going to buy a grappling hook. I have no idea why, but it looks cool and I'm going to use it. So they're great references to start from. Okay, so once we have the form set up, whether it's a picture or just a quick sketch like I did here, we're going to want to start adding the layers of the armor. And that's just going to be base, shape, plate, form. So I know that I'm going to want something that's going to be like big around the waist. It's going to be a belt. I don't really want to do big, bulky plate chest pieces because I just don't like the way that will look for this character. I want it to be a little more brawly and a little more kind of padded armor. So I'm going to start with just doing some base shapes, and I'll get the shoulder pads roughed out. And then from there, I can really start going in and deciding what was going to be in these layers. So where do we need leather? Where do we need chain? Where do we need plates? We'd really need to keep in mind that those are pretty much what we're working with, unless you're using something really fantastical. But like there's no nylon, there's not a lot of like polyesters and things, no spandex. So we really need to look at wools, cottons, natural things that are going to be kind of bulky and they're gonna hang either heavily or loosely like a silk. And so those things are all going to be held up, or we need to think about how they're all going to be held up, because most of the time they're going to be held up either by a belt or a fastener or simply just wrapped around the character. So I usually start with the belt when I'm doing this, and just to think of like, okay, how big is the belt? What are they carrying? Do they need a chest strap? Is this going to be something that's clasped to their back, to their shoulder? I love putting skulls on belts. I don't know why. It's just Conan the Barbarian has embedded that in my head. So I like to add those all the time, especially when it's just a free character that doesn't really need anything. A lot of times if you have something that needs an emblem, a belt's a good place to put it. If they have a belt buckle of their order or a holy symbol, you can do it there. You can do it like on the lapel. But the belt buckle is a great way to do that. And I always like thinking that the belts themselves are part of the armor, whether it be like a big girdle or just a big plate. So once you get those base shapes in, and I'm using the shape of the body to kind of inform the contours of my armor. If you need to do a little more volumetric drawing first, that's totally fine. But once you get those base shapes in, you can really start thinking about details. How are these fastened together? Do I need buckles? Do I need rivets? Do I need clasps? And you can start bringing those larger components together and really start informing how the armor is put together. So I wanted to add more of like a leather neck piece that is holding the armor chest plate up, and I was going to give it a big collar, start adding some shoulder rigging so I can attach the shoulder pads to it. And then I really like having those kind of like ornamental metal shoulder pads that are a little bigger. It's a little more fantasy-esque instead of just tight, small shoulder pads, which is probably more realistic. So I do take a lot of free embellishment here. I mean, who would wear a girdle this big? It's fine to do that because you're making this character for you and for your the way you want the armor to look. Talking about art styles now, there are tons of tutorials out there on like proper ways to draw and sketch. And really, you should be doing it the way that's more comfortable for you. I have a really kind of sloppy sketch style, and then it does end up taking me more time to add finer details and color. I generally have like a base layer, and then I draw on top of it, and then I used to go in with another layer on top of that to redo all the lines, but I spent so much time doing that and I lost a lot of the sketchy detail that I really like. So I've been spending a lot of time lately trying to find ways to keep some of those sketchy lines, and the way I've been doing that now is kind of keeping my lines on one layer, and instead of doing overlay, I'll just start erasing and being really comfortable with erasing some of my lines and part of my lines, and it's getting a style for me that I really like, and it's not for everybody. So if you have a way that you like drawing, just keep working at it until it's clean and to a level that you like. That being said, don't always say if something is bad. You need to be able to own up to that and say, hey, I need to spend more time on this. I need to try something different, and just keep working at it until you really like it. That's the important thing, because if you like your artwork and you are actually happy with it, chances are someone else will like that style too. So always try to keep growing and learning and trying new things until you find something that you really like, and then keep moving from there. At this point, I hate this helmet. I hate this face. So I'm going to go ahead and just erase it all, because this is about the armor anyways. So I'll come back and I'll work on that another time. I think this might even end up being that I will just do the line work and maybe some of the value today for the armor. And then I might do another color video later this week or next week, just so I can show you kind of what my process is. So here I'm adding a little more of those details now, because I have those shapes and I'm like, okay, well, I'm defining what all of these are. These need to have some straps that are holding these together, whether there's some beads or some rigging that's holding stuff up. And you can see I'm starting to turn off my my underlayer, because I'm not really sure if that's the end thing I want to go with. What do I want to accentuate with the armor? I'm eventually going to have weapons and shields on here, so I need to think about all that. But for the most part, Ryan, I just want to focus on the armor, focus on the plates, how they're attaching, and keep building that direction. So right here, this is something big, especially for Pathfinder and drawing an adventurer, is how things are held together. And I mentioned this with the belt and strapping. How are you holding all these pieces together? And so for me, I really like the idea of like looping and belting, and it could be because I've worked in kitchens for so long, so I'm used to wearing an apron. I'm used to wearing like a leather bib when I'm working in a metal shop. Having those layers of protective cloth that are just kind of tied on is pretty comfortable for me, and I like that idea. And sometimes with a lot of my armor, I'll put different things like strapped in it, whether you have like a back coat just kind of tucked into the belt, or something that's just slung on it. I think those little details are really what make characters pop. A big part of that is, if they have a potion or a bag, how are they attaching that to their belt? Or if it's, this character always has a wand with him, it's like, do they have a holster for it? Do they just have a little tie for it, little leather thong or something that's wrapped around it? And adding those details are going to really make your character pop. Sometimes when I'm walking through the mall or near a clothing store, I'll see really unique belts or like buckles on clothes, and I'll take pictures of those and log those away, so I have them for future references. The next big thing to keep in mind while you're drawing these is what the materials you're using are made out of, because these are a lot of natural materials, especially if you have like a heavy leather or silks. They're not going to have a lot of stretch, so your character either has to tie them on, fasten them on, or tie a like a shoelace, really, especially for some of these like larger pieces. Like cloaks have clasps around the belt; they might have just little ties, and little details will really help with your character design. Especially if you can kind of uniform, so they, I have a lot of ties or I have a lot of buttons. Those kind of things will keep your characters feeling unique and built. Whereas a lot of my older work was a lot of large plates that just kind of attached, and that didn't make a lot of sense. So at this point now, I can really start going in and I can erase a lot of these more sketchy, lighter lines. I've removed my bottom layer that was my original form, and I just have my armor layer now. And I really start cleaning up the inlines, and I start adding very fine details. I've made my brush quite a bit smaller. I am just using a round brush for all of this because it's easy, and I kind of like the bulkier line weight I get from it. But you can really go in here and start adding details. You can start adding skulls and stuff, whatever intricate details you want for your character. Once again, if you have an emblem or a logo that you need to put all over your character. This is a great time to do that. Really start removing a lot of the bulk of the lines, thinking about line weighting. Things that are closer to you are going to be thicker. Detailed things are going to be a lot smaller and thinner. I can start making things look like chainmail, making things look a little bit like leather. I am trying really hard not to add value yet, because that will be something you'll see around like the neck and the skull here. There are black that is really pushed far back, partially because I know that's not going to need any more detail. So it's just like I'm just pushing it as far back as I can. But I am adding some value lines just to add some depth. But I want to do a lot more of that later, and just try to keep this down to texture and some form. So you can see where I'm adding hatch lines to create a little bit of depth. And here on the shoulder pad, I'm going to start trying to do some detailing, but I'm not going to go super crazy with it because this is going to be still a small image. I don't have to go super fine detail. If I was going to do that, I would zoom in really close and I would make everything look really crisp and clean. So this is still very much adding detail and refining shapes. So I'm taking a lot of the things that I had put in as volumetric shapes, like these dots and pins, and now I'm making them into fangs, and I'm cleaning up the lines so they really pop the way I want. I was very much taking those volumetric shapes that I started with, and now I'm adding the detail, and then the next step I'll actually start adding the value to really define that detail and really lock down the shape I want. So that's really it for the line work. I'm going to go in here and make things a little crisper and sharper. I'll probably add a few more details. Maybe I still need some potions on this one, but for the most part, that's my process. I think about the references I want to use. I think about what the purpose of these things are, and then I just go to town. I start doodling. I get shapes. I get form. Really start as basic as you can, as scribbly as you can, and then refine and refine again. And refine again. And sometimes I even have to stop, come back the next day, go get lunch, something, come back, and then really look at it from far away and think, okay, I need to move this shape a little more, and I need to keep refining and keep refining. And if you do have to make a new layer and draw over, like redraw the arm, definitely go do that. I mean, I get really picky about some things and kind of not picky about others, but just keep taking your time and looking and refining. So for a lot of these, I try not to draw on the background layer anymore, and so I always have this as a separate layer. So I'm drawing and erasing and drawing and erasing and drawing and erasing. If you do want to do more of a painterly aspect, you could just have white and black and just keep painting over the top, and black and white and black and white and black and white and black and white until it's more of a sculpting almost. Here again, I'm back at the kind of the accessories of the character. I have the sword sheath because I know I want to draw the sword in there eventually. So add some potions, because what adventurer doesn't have a stash of different kinds of potions going on? And I'm really just bouncing around, cleaning up, changing things that I don't like. I made the potions a little bigger because I thought they were too small. Adding detail, erasing, adding detail, erasing. It's kind of non-stop. You just keep going until it's done. And there are definitely, I could spend a lot more time on this, make it really, really clean. But for what I want out of it, I'm pretty happy with where it is now. So I'm going to start moving on to shading. So I make a new layer underneath. I just get a solid value going. And then this way I can start adding light, adding shadow, and really start making some things pop. I know I want that skull to pop out a little more. I'm probably still going to have to edit the form a little bit, but I can do that pretty easily. And then after that, I start painting on top of this, and I really actually get in there and start painting kind of more traditionally than I would when I do like sketches. So I'll probably do that in another video, but that is how I come up with my fantasy armor. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, or you have your own drawings, drop them down below or on the Tandem Gamers Instagram, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody.